Good morning and welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Madison. My name is Kelly Crocker and I am one of the ministers here. Today I am joined by my colleague, the Reverend Kelly Asprooth-Jackson, along with the worship team of Linda Warren, Drew Collins, Stephen Gregorius. We also have our special guest hymn leader, Jennifer Yancey, and our musical guest, Tamara Brognano. The vision of First Unitarian Society is growing souls, connecting with one another, and embodying our Unitarian Universalist values in our lives, in our community, and in our world. If you're visiting us today, welcome. We are so very glad that you are with us. If you would like more information about First Unitarian Society, please stop by the welcome table that is located in the Commons. We hope that you will be able to stay and join us for coffee hour immediately after service outside on the landmark lawn. And for those of you connecting virtually with us today, we're glad you are with us as well, and we hope you will be able to join us for our virtual coffee hour immediately following service. The information for joining can be found on the homepage of our website, fusmadison.org, as well as on the slide that will be seen again after today's postlude. Our announcement slides will also be shown briefly after service, and so we encourage you to take a moment to watch those and learn more about our upcoming programs and activities. You may have seen that Dane County has moved into high on the COVID Act Now Community Risk Tracker. What this means for us here is that as of Wednesday, we will be requiring masks everywhere inside our buildings. And we will be doing that until we return to medium once again. And our after-service activities today for children will be held outside on the playground. And parents, know that you can bring your kids to the playground. There will be activities and folks there with them so that you can be over in coffee hour if you'd like to discuss or process today's service. We do have one special request from our Children's Religious Exploration staff. They're looking for a team of volunteers to carry donations outside from Courtyard Room D out to the lawn at the Isom House immediately after service. So if you're able to help bring some children's toys, pretty much, that we no longer need here to be donated, if you could meet Zan at the courtyard stairs and the ramp that's directly across from the kitchen. And that's Zan right there. And now, I invite you to join me in a moment of silence as we center ourselves and bring ourselves fully into this time as we join together once again in community. Here we are in our circle again, a circle of vision and reflection, a forum for deciding and empowering.
Here we are at the base of another bridge, another space spanning the shores of today and tomorrow, beckoning us to cross the chasm one day at a time.
Here we are gathered again at the cusp of the future, at the boundary that holds community together.
Here we are, in a circle of love and trust, brought to this moment by a series of choices and promises, by hope and gratitude, by our own shadows, faced and befriended.
With a servant's heart, with a leader's listening, with a parent's love truer than all our inner trembling, let us model the health we seek for all and lean into community.
Somewhere out there, all we dream is possible. Somewhere in here, we are sowing the seeds.
And I invite you now to rise in all the ways we do as we join together in our words of affirmation as we light our chalice. In these hard times, let us look first to the response of love. In the midst of challenge, may our chalice flame bear witness to the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. In the midst of uncertainty, may our chalice be a beacon of encouragement, that our values may guide our choices. Let us look first to the response of love.
Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing, show to us beauty, vision, and joy. Please join us for our opening hymn, number 102, We the Heirs of Many Ages. We the heirs of many ages, with the wise to guide our ways, honor all earth's seers and sages, build our temples for their praise. But the good we claim to cherish, all that Christ and Buddha taught, unrepentant hearts let perish, spurning truth most dearly bought. Centuries of moral teaching, words of wisdom, ancient lore, all the prophets' souls beseeching, leaves us heedless as before. Late in time may we, forsaking all our cruelty and scorn, see a new tomorrow breaking, and a kinder world be born.
Well, folks, I'd like to tell you a story this morning. And if anybody would like to come up and join me for it, you're welcome to. You can also stay where you are if you'd prefer. That's a great place to be. So here is the story that I want to tell you. This story comes from the Buddhist religion. Does anybody know who the founder of the Buddhist religion was? Yes, you know, or yes, you did? Yes, we did. All right. Well, as you might divine from the name, the founder we usually call the Buddha. And one of the beliefs in Buddhism is that we all live and die and then live again. So some people, after they die, will come back to life as animals, and some people will come back to life as other people. So one of the types of stories in the Buddhist religion are stories about the Buddha before he was the Buddha, when he was living other lives in other places and other bodies. So this is one of those stories. In this story, the Buddha was an old man who had a family, and then he died, because eventually everybody does die. Now, when he died, he was born again as a duck. But not just any duck, a golden duck. A duck whose feathers were literally made out of gold. And because, well, probably because he was going to be the Buddha eventually, he remembered who he used to be. He remembered being that old man with the family. And he couldn't resist going from the place where the duck was living, you understand, which is in a different part of the world, back to where he had lived before as a human being, and looking in on that family to see how they were doing. And the answer was, they weren't doing so great. They were having a hard time since he had died, and he wanted to do something to help them. So one day, he went to the family when they were sitting in their house. He flew in through the window, and he said, "Behold, it is I, who you used to know, and now I am a golden duck. And I would like for you to take one of my feathers and sell it, so you'll have a little bit of an easier time of it and have some money to spend." Well, of course, they were pretty impressed, first of all, by the golden duck, second of all, by the fact that the golden duck could talk, and third, by the fact that the golden duck had a story about how it used to be their husband, brother, father, grandfather, the member of the family. So they did what the duck asked them to do. They took the feather, and they sold it, and they had a little bit of money that way, and life was a little bit easier for a while. Because money won't solve all of your problems, but boy, it does address many of them. So that made things a little easier for a little while, but families have a lot of needs. Eventually, the same sort of problems happened again, and the duck came back and said, "I want you to take one of my feathers again, because I can tell that you could really use the money." So this went on for a little while, back and forth, until eventually, one member of the family, let's not talk about who, it doesn't really matter, but one member of the family decided that they didn't want to wait for that duck to come back again. "Who knows if you can trust an animal," they said. "We should take all the feathers at once, and then we won't have to worry about whether the duck's going to come back and take pity on us or not." So that is what they did, because it really just takes one person to ruin a good thing sometimes, unfortunately. So this member of the family grabbed hold of the duck and plucked all the duck's feathers off. All the duck's feathers. Do you know what happens to a bird when they don't have feathers? No? They can't fly. So now the duck couldn't fly. I mean, that's not the only problem, but it's one of the problems it creates for a duck that doesn't have any feathers. So the duck was sort of stuck hanging around the house now, bare, wasn't really a golden duck anymore. But there was another problem, because remember, this is a magical duck. I mean, it's pretty obvious because its feathers are made out of gold that it's a magical duck. And so what they didn't count on was that one of the things that was magical about those feathers was that if anyone ever took one of those feathers without the duck's permission, it just turned into a regular duck feather. It wasn't gold anymore. So now you've got a duck with no feathers, a pile of feathers with no duck attached, and nothing of any significant value to sell. Eventually, the duck's feathers grew back, but they grew back like normal duck feathers, and it just flew away, and it never returned. So, do you think that there's a lesson in this story? Anybody out there? Here's a lesson that I have for it. Don't take feathers without asking. Thanks for coming and hearing the story.
And I now invite you into the giving and receiving of today's offering. We give freely and generously to the offering, which today will go in its entirety to benefit the Wisconsin Medical Fund. The Wisconsin Medical Fund is one of the oldest abortion funds in the nation. Since 1972, they have supported Wisconsin residents in paying for abortion care, working to ensure that everyone who needs access to this medical care can do so. So you'll see on the screen that you can donate directly from our website, fusmadison.org. You'll find the text to give information there as well. And for those of you here in person, there are baskets at the doors of the auditorium for checks and cash. We thank you for your generosity and for your faith in this life we create together.
So this next song is from a folk duo called the Bengsons. The words are really simple. It's a short song, so I'd like to invite all of you here in the auditorium and anyone watching on their screens to join me if you feel the mood to sing along. If you're not in a place where you want to sing this morning, maybe you'll join me with stomping. We're going to start out with a stomp. We will not be controlled. I am sovereign in my body. I am sovereign in my soul. Sing it with me. We will not be controlled. I am sovereign in my body. I am sovereign in my soul. We will not be controlled. I am sovereign in my body. I am sovereign in my soul. We will not be controlled. I am sovereign in my body. I am sovereign in my soul. We will not be controlled. I am sovereign in my body. I am sovereign in my soul.
A reading from Elizabeth Mount. To begin, to start, to create, to undertake, to grow, to promise, to increase, to generate. All these are our birthright. As we are created, so may we create. The ability and the choice to create is sacred. To withdraw that chance from any person without their permission would be a violent act, the cutting off of life itself. A single powerful red-orange flame glows in the darkness around it, and yet, as precious is the right to simply not, to end, to terminate, to stop, to discontinue, to rest, to hibernate, to impede, to prevent. These, too, are our birthright. For without consent, our ability to create becomes not a blessing, but a burden and an imposition. Without space for a no, there can be no trustworthy yes. Today we come to this holy place and time ready to invoke the divine, to make space for the sacred, to co-create community once again. This too is a choice. You may not be coerced into relationship with the holy or with one another. I invite you. I ask you to join us. I respect if you will not, today or ever. More sacred than any other individual need is choice. The right to know oneself, the right to know what you are ready for, what you need, to stretch when you can, to pause when you will, to know your body, your mind, your spirit better than anyone else, and ultimately, to be trusted with the responsibility of your own living.
Please rise in body or spirit. Join us in singing hymn number 1026, If Every Woman in the World. If every woman in the world had her
I must say this clearly at the outset. I am going to speak this morning about abortion, about the right of a person who is pregnant to choose to terminate that pregnancy, and about the recent loss of that right here in Wisconsin. There are any number of reasons why this might be a hard subject for many of us. So I want to make sure that you take care of yourselves as you listen. If you need to move out of the auditorium, please listen to your body and to your spirit about that need. Those of you who are with us online, if you need to pause the video or stop it entirely, that's okay. My feelings will not be hurt. Several of our lay ministers have volunteered to be here this morning to provide a listening presence after the service for anyone who needs it. And I will be out there in the commons as well, and I will be glad to talk to any of you about this for however long you need to talk about it for. I hope that you will stay, but I understand if you go. Whatever you choose, I trust it will be the choice that you needed to make. So, about a month ago, the Supreme Court overturned a precedent that had been in place since before I was born, effectively declaring that there is no inherent right to an abortion for a person who is pregnant. It is now up to each state whether or not to protect or limit or ban access to such medical care. Here in Wisconsin, we have a law still on the books from a little bit before the Civil War, which makes abortion illegal. While that law is being challenged, the practical effect right now is that it is not currently possible to legally and safely access abortion care in our state. That decision from the court has harmed and diminished every woman and every person who can become pregnant within the jurisdiction of our laws. Those are two overlapping but not identical groups. And it's important to include both in our understanding of what is so terribly wrong here. Restricting or banning abortion, anything that denies it as a right of medical access, obviously impacts anyone who can become pregnant. That's a group that most women fall into, at least for part of their lives. But there are also some trans and non-binary folks who can become pregnant but are not women. Their right and ability to make fundamental decisions about their own bodies is just as much in jeopardy. And at the same time, there are many people who are women and cannot become pregnant. The physical possibility of becoming pregnant is not a universal experience among women. Infertility is a very real and common experience that affects a great many people and families for a variety of different medical reasons. But being infertile does not make a woman any less of a woman. Trans women, given the current range of options available for gender confirmation surgery, are also not physically able to become pregnant. But being transgender does not make a woman any less of a woman. The issue of abortion rights affects all women, even those who never will and never can become pregnant, because it shapes the range of what is possible legally and socially for women in a society. The ability to choose when to become pregnant or when not to be pregnant has been and continues to be essential to opening almost any other door in terms of what is possible for women in our society. The argument generally made against reproductive freedom is an argument about life and personhood and when these things begin. Specifically, that personhood begins at the moment of conception, and so every pregnancy is a person and should be defended as such by the law. This is the official teaching of a number of major religious groups in the United States and throughout the world. But it is actually a relatively new concept in which a modern scientific understanding of a biological process has been pressed together with an ancient traditional understanding of the beginning of human life. Different cultures and religions have marked the beginning of life at various points. And the two most common of these are the first breath taken after birth, and, in the Christian side of things, the quickening, basically the moment at which the person who is pregnant first feels the motion of that pregnancy, first kick, usually. For most of the history of organized Christianity, this was taught to be the moment at which God ensouled the new and growing body. Now, this is an area where Unitarian Universalism has no singular position. Our religion has no official orthodox teaching on the soul, or on God, for that matter. On when the latter bestows the former, certainly not. Our tradition makes space for a variety of opinions and beliefs. Unitarian Universalist arguments for reproductive freedom tend to focus on the sort that you might have heard in the public square most commonly, the fundamental right to the autonomy of one's own body and the way in which reproductive choice expands the possibilities open to women in society. It must be said as well that there's at least one crucial related argument here, that where abortion is not legal, it still happens anyway, but only under more dangerous and sometimes deadly circumstances. Now, by themselves, I believe these arguments are sufficient. I'm not against any of these lines of reasoning. But on the specific topic of the beginning of life, I believe our tradition has something clear and powerful to say, despite the fact that we are not known for our orthodox directives on pretty much anything at all. Pregnancy, the process by which new human beings come into existence, is incredibly commonplace and completely essential to the world as it is. And it has been so for as long as we have been. And yet, despite how common it is, the process of pregnancy is inherently wondrous, by which I mean it is fundamentally tied to the cosmic mystery of our existence as a species and as individuals. I'm completely comfortable calling it a miracle, but my faith also tells me that there are critical limits on my authority to call it such. Our theological ancestors, the Unitarian and Universalist heretics who are the reason why we exist today, lived in times and in places where what was miraculous and what was anathema were decreed by a rigid theological authority. And disagreement with that authority meant persecution or death. Many of the disagreements with authority that got our ancestors into so much trouble can be explained as disputes about what was a miracle and what was not. To the claim that a distant, inflexible church hierarchy held the exclusive spiritual authority to tell them what was sacred and what was profane, our forebears asserted a different principle, that the power to know and to follow what is sacred is present in every human being, and that forcing someone to agree to a miracle they did not themselves agree to was itself a desecration. particularly in the sacraments tied to matters of the body, such as the eating and drinking of the Eucharist and the ritual of baptism. The person whose body is at issue must determine for themselves if a miracle is happening and what the meaning of that miracle is. Things so precious and intimate cannot be made holy from the top down. If they are to be holy, it must come from the inside out. The judgment of the individual, supported by the wider circle of their community. Perhaps, then, you can see the deep vein of our tradition that the argument over personhood and the beginning of life touches on. Somewhere between the moment before conception and the moment after birth, a new life, separate and distinct, begins. But that mysterious process takes place entirely within and depends entirely upon a person, their body, who is whole and complete and not merely a means to an end, but an end in themselves. Therefore, they must be held as the highest spiritual authority on what their own body is doing. Their fundamental right to judge what is taking place within them as miraculous or otherwise must not be infringed, because to do so not only would rob them of the divine capacity to understand the sacred for themselves, but it would desecrate the very idea of holiness itself by forcing it upon someone when it must be freely accepted in order to have meaning. And still, it must even be said that sometimes a miracle isn't actually enough. So here is a story, one in which I am present but entirely peripheral. And I'm going to give you one extra warning now. If you want to leave, it's okay. Many years ago, when I worked as a hospital chaplain, one of my assignments was to the NICU, the ward where the very sickest babies are cared for. I also took regular turns being on call for the whole hospital, either after hours or covering the sections that were low traffic and didn't have chaplains assigned to them. So it was that within a month or so of each other, I met two different women. The first one I met after the termination of her pregnancy. It had been a wanted pregnancy, very much wished for. But she had been given the terrible news after she was already many months into it that her fetus had a condition incompatible with life. Even if born, it would not be able to survive outside of the womb for more than an hour, no matter what heroic medical interventions were taken. Anguished, but clear in her choice, she'd made the decision, with the support of her partner and their family, to end that pregnancy now. I spoke with her, listened to her story, and at her request, I blessed the remains of that life that never got to be. Now, the second woman I met in the NICU. She had just delivered her child. He was many weeks premature, and his condition was also incompatible with life. The mother told me that she had received that diagnosis, had been told very clearly by the doctors what would happen. she had chosen to proceed with her pregnancy. She was profoundly in a deep state of grief, but she had no doubt or hesitation about the choice that she had made. I sat with her while she held her baby for the brief minutes of his life. I share these two stories with you, one in which I was just sort of there. They're not really mine to tell, because I have thought of them many times in the years since, and almost constantly over the last month. These two people, these two women, were faced with nearly identical questions. They made opposite decisions, and each suffered and endured losses that, as a person who can never become pregnant, I really and truly cannot imagine. It is a sad truth about the world that sometimes we are faced with decisions we never wanted to have to make, that no human being should ever have to make. The choices about their pregnancies of both of the women that I met in the hospital rightly belonged to them. It would have been, to me, the height of hubris and villainy to condescend to them, that I knew better than they in either case. Robbing them of their choice would have compounded the terrible wrong that necessitated the choice to begin with. And yet this is what has been done by our system of government. Robbing people in circumstances like these, who might choose either to end or to continue their pregnancies, of the right to choose. It makes the loss of their agency, their full personhood, one more loss atop the mountain of grief. If this was a hard story for you to hear, please know that I understand. It was a hard one for me to tell. And one that I chose out of the range of stories about abortion that I am connected to through colleagues, through friends, through family members, through intimate partners. I shared it for this reason. The project of denying full humanity and full personhood to women and to all people who can become pregnant has just had its greatest success of the past 50 years. Confronting that, challenging that, and ultimately overcoming that in the interest of a truly free and equal society will require us to tell more stories about abortion, including the most personal and the most painful ones. To tell them and to hear them without shame, without apology, and not to be silent in how our personal experiences and personal beliefs inform our choices and our determination to defend the right of others to choose.
What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens? What happens? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens? What happens? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power?
What happens when she wears the crown?
What happens when she rules her own body?
What happens when she sets the beat?
What happens when she bows to nobody? What happens when she stands on her own 2 feet? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens? What happens? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she wears the crown? Whoa, we rise above war. We lead with love. Whoa, we have won. We are one. We've just begun. Whoa, we rise above war. We lead with love. Whoa, we have won. We are one. We've just begun. What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens? What happens? What happens? What happens? What happens when she wears the crown?
We gather each week creating a community of love and support, a place and a time where we can share both the celebrations and the sorrows of our days. We light a candle for Richard McCoy, who passed away on July 3rd. A memorial service will be held here on September 11th in our landmark auditorium in the early afternoon. And we're holding Richard's family in our hearts as they grieve his passing and miss him dearly. And we light a candle of sorrow and loss for the Reverend Rob Eller Isaacs, who passed away yesterday at home with his family. Alongside his wife Jan, Rob served Unity Church Unitarian in St. Paul for over 20 years. They just retired a year ago. We hold Jan and their family in tender care as we both mourn and remember. And we light a candle in solidarity with the people of Ukraine, both in their suffering and in their struggle. Together we yearn for peace for them and for all people, and for an end to all wars of conquest everywhere and anywhere on earth. And if you'll join me now in a moment of prayer with these words from Tamara Lebeck. Holy One who has given us the breath of life, today we remember to breathe deeply, to rest, to take in, to pause before we act, and then to take in another deep breath, poised on the edge, and risk jumping in, risk taking action, risk speaking up, risk using the gifts we have been given, so that at the end of our lives we can say with absolute clarity that no part of our existence was wasted in fear of failure or fear of success. Hold us, prepare us the way to begin to offer the gift of our presence, full of love and light. Hold all these and the prayers of our hearts we lift up now in the silence. Blessed be, and amen.
There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. A brief note about our closing hymn. This hymn was written in honor of the women and girls who went on strike at the textile mills in Lawrence, Massachusetts in 1912. Please rise in body or spirit and join us in singing our closing hymn, number 109, As We Come Marching, Marching. As we come marching, marching in the beauty of the day, a million darkened kitchens, a thousand workshops gray, are touched with all the radiance that a sudden sun discloses. For the people hear us singing, bread and roses, bread and roses. As we come marching, marching, we battle to for men, for they are women's children, and we mother them again. Our lives shall not be sweated from birth until life closes. Hearts starve as well as bodies. Give us bread, but give us roses. As we come marching, marching, unnumbered women dead, go crying through war, singing their ancient song of bread. Small art and love and beauty, their drudging spirits new. Yes, it is bread we fight for, but we fight for roses too. As we come marching, marching, we bring the greater days, the rising of the women meets the rising of the race. No more the drudge and idler, tend and toil where one reposes, but a sharing of life's glories, bread and roses,
When all is quiet and we are small and the night is dark, may we hear the tender breathing of all who lie awake with us in fear, that together we may gather strength to live with love and kindness and confidence. Blessed be, go in peace, and please be seated for the postlude.
I come to sing a song about hope. I'm not inspired much right now, but even so, I came out here to sing a song, so here I go. I guess I think that if I tinker long enough, one might appear. And look, it's here. One verse is done. The work's begun. I come to sing a song about hope. In spite of everything ridiculous and sad, though I'm beyond belief depressed, confused, and mad. Well, I got dressed. I underestimated how much that would take. I didn't break until right now. I sing of hope and don't know how. So maybe I can substitute strength because I'm strong. I'm strong enough. I got through lots of things I didn't think I could. And so did you. I know that's true. And so I sing a song about hope. Though I can't guarantee there's something real behind it, I have to try to show my kids that I can find it. And so today, when life is crazy and impossible to bear, it must be there. Fear never wins. That's what I hope. See, I said hope. The work begins.